Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Jashodanandana Bhadrajana Nandana Yashodanandana Bhadrajana Nandana Yamuna Tira Vanatari Yamuna Tira Vanatari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Vishnu Par Paramahamsa Harivrajagacharya Ashtottara Sacha Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Vishnu Par Paramahamsa Harivrajagacharya Ashtottara Sacha Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Forgive me. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 8, text 18. Okay, so just word for word. Kaha. Eshaha. Yah aso aham. Abjaprashte. Etat. Kutaha. Va. Abjam. Ananyat. Apsu. Asti. Hi. Athastat. Iha. Kinchana. Etat. Adishtitam. So that's Yatra Sata Nu Bhayam Bhavyam Kaheshayo Savaham Abjaprishta Kaheshayo Savaham Abjaprishta Etat Kuto Vabjamananyarapsu Etat Kuto Vabjamananyarapsu Asti Yatastar Iha Kinchanaitat Asti Yadastar Iha Kinchanaitat Adishtitam Yatra Sathanubhavyam Adishtitam Yatra Sathanubhavyam Kaishayo Savaham Abjaprishta Etat Kuto Vabjamananyadatsu Asti hyadastariha kinchanaitat
Astihadastadya kinchanaita
adishtitam yatra satatu nubhavyam.
adhishtitam yatra satanubhavyam.
Please repeat.
Kaeshayosavahamabja prashtha
Abjuprashta
etat kuto vabjamanan ananyadapsu
etat yukoto vabjamananyarapsu
Astihadastadya kinchanaita
Adhishtitam
yatra satanubhavyam.
yatra satanubhavyam.
You're scrolling the wrong way.
Eshayosa vahamabjaprashta etat kuto vabjamananyarapsu
Astihadastadya kinchanaita
adishtitam yatra satanubhavyam.
Kaeshayosavahamabjaprishta
Etat
kuto vabjamananyadapsu
etat kuto vabjamananyadapsu
Astihadastadya kinchanaita
Astihadastadya
Kinchanaitat
Adhishtitam yatra satanubhavyam.
adishtitam yatra satanubhavyam. Mataji. Kaeshayosa vahamabjaprashta etat kuto vabjamananyarapsu astithyastariha kinchanaitat adishtitam yatra satanubhavyam. Okay, word for word. Kaha, who. Eshaha, this. Yahosawaham, Yaha asawaham, that I am. Abjaparshte, on top of the lotus. Etat, this. Sorry. Kutaha, where from? Abjam, I'm sorry, va, either. Abjam, lotus flower. Ananyat, otherwise. Apsu, in the water. Asti, there is. He, certainly. Adhastat, from below. Iha, in this. Kinchana, anything. Etat, this. Adishtitam, situated. Yatra, wherein. Sata, automatically. Nu, or not. Bhavyam, must be. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Brahma in his ignorance contemplated, who am I that am situated on the top of this lotus? Wherefrom has it sprouted? There must be something downwards, and that from which this lotus has grown must be within the water. Purport. The subject matter of the speculations of Brahma in the beginning regarding the creation of the cosmic manifestation is still a subject matter for mental speculators. The most intelligent man is he who tries to find the cause of his personal existence, and that of the whole cosmic creation, and thus tries to find the ultimate cause. If his attempt is properly executed with penances and perseverance, it is sure to be crowned with success. So I'll just go through 19. Saitam uddiksha tarabjanala nadhi pirantar jalamavishesha narva katastat karanala nala nabhing vichinvangstara vindataja. Translation. Lord Brahma, thus contemplating, entered the water through the channel of the stem of the lotus. But in spite of entering the stem and going nearer to the navel of Vishnu, he could not trace out the root. Purport. By dint of one's personal endeavor, one may go nearer to the Lord, but without the Lord's mercy, one cannot reach the ultimate point. Such understanding of the Lord is possible only by devotional service, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Bhaktya mam abhijananti yavan yashchasmi tattvataha. Okay. So, let's just go through my prayers. Om Gyanat Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yana Putele Svahim Rupakara Mahyam Darati Shvapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Atahpara Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Sacha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vidam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Parirana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vashan Kanvitam Sacha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jigatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostite Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Veranta Vanishvari Vershapanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sundubhye Vicha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Putale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swaminiti Namane Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Putale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadeshacharini Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Virinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we see here essentially Lord Brahma being even the most intelligent being, even he's born into ignorance. And he's posing intelligent questions about the self and the origin of the self, which is the beginning of spiritual life. But we see still that essentially, as Prabhupada states, that by his own personal endeavor, even though he goes closer to the origin of where this lotus is sprouted out from, he doesn't actually come to any sort of conclusion that answers any of his questions. Prabhupada actually makes it the point that if you know the self, then you can know all things. And you can strengthen, if you will, how do I put this? You can strengthen the mind by intelligence, by proper use of intelligence and cultivation of knowledge. But we should know that this isn't the highest thing, if you will, even though it's still key. So Krishna is so kind, he allows people who are inclined according to their different natures to engage the body, the mind, and intelligence accordingly. Karmis, jnanis, and yogis to try to cultivate spiritual knowledge. But these are different means of liberation, but the conclusion should still be the same. One should always still arrive at devotional service, as this is the topmost thing. If you pull up, I don't know who's on the screen, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 32. Essentially, let me see. He doesn't have pocket Vedas, I guess. Also, on another note, how do I pull this stand up?
Chapter 4?
Chapter 4, verse 32, please.
2.
4, chapter 4, verse 32.
32.
Yes, thank you. Evam bahu vidha yagnya vitata brahmano mukhe karma jan riti tan sarvan evam yatva vimokshase. So translation reads that all these different types of sacrifice are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated. Can you pull up the purport? I wanted to read a little bit from there. It states essentially that different types of sacrifice, as discussed above, are mentioned in the Vedas to suit the different types of worker. Because men are so deeply absorbed in this bodily conception, these sacrifices are so arranged that one can work either with the body, with the mind, or with the intelligence. But all of them are all recommended for ultimately bringing about liberation from the body. This is confirmed by the Lord herewith from his own mouth. So this is perfect knowledge, essentially. I had realized there's so many small books I still have to go through, but I was reading Coming Back the other day, And there's a quote specifically from, I think his name is Albert St. Georgi. I'm probably butchering his name. I don't know what origin that is, but he won a Nobel Peace Prize, I think, for, I'm assuming, I think it was physics specifically. He's a Nobel laureate, he says. And he quotes that, "In my search for the secret of life, I ended up with atoms and electrons which have no life at all. Somewhere along the line, life has run through my fingers. So in my old age, I'm now retracing my steps." So ironically, if we look, Lord Brahma actually finds himself in a situation quite like this. If you go to 3.8.20, I'm sorry, I guess I probably should have read the translation in Sanskrit for that as well. Sorry. But it reads, Tamasya pare vidaratma sargam vichintvato bhut sumahang trinemihi yode habhajam bhavyam irayanaha parikshanotya yurajasya hetihi. O Vidura, while searching in that way about its existence, Brahma reached his ultimate time, which is the eternal wheel in the hands of Vishnu, which generates fear in the mind of the living entity, like the fear of death. This tamasi apare, because of searching in ignorance, it essentially just ends up being a fruitless endeavor. Brahma doesn't get his questions answered, and at the expense of his searching by his own personal endeavor, he also loses time, as reflected on by this physicist. So even though, if you look, obviously, like people, I think this point was made by Vishnu Chitta Prabhu previously about just the duration of life within this body. Even with this short amount of time we have, philosophers and scientists are trying to answer, even if they're asking the right questions, they're still going about it in the wrong way, and they're trying to use this limited time that we have in this body to try to answer these questions. And Lord Brahma, who had so much more time allotted to him, still couldn't even answer these questions. So what to speak of us who are these tiny human beings, especially in the age of Kali Yuga? It's just not possible by dint of our own personal endeavor. We might get closer, but arriving at proper knowledge by which we can actually apply in our lives, that gives us an understanding of what the purpose of life is. We can't just arrive at this by our own mental speculation ultimately. So again, as like I said, we see this with the Lord Brahma. He first dives down into the water, and he doesn't gain any real knowledge, and then he speculates on this as well, and he spends his whole life like this essentially. And this is the same thing that you see that's consistent with so much of today's so-called knowledge. We're living in a civilization where advancement more or less just means change, and we're putting the title improvement on changing from what was previously presented as the new solution. But as we saw with the horse manure, I guess, of 1894, was it? That you talked about, yeah, something like that in New York. Like, for example, you had the problem with horse manure on the streets, and then you bring about motor cars, but then you also have so much pollution that comes about from that. So these material solutions to material problems don't actually bring about any greater benefit, if you will. So this intelligence, which is improperly applied, it doesn't give us a conclusion. It doesn't give us Krishna ultimately. Sorry, if you could pull up 16:9. Going about in this way, trying to concoct our own solutions, actually only ends up bringing about greater misfortune. There's so many accidents that end up arising, if you will, as a result of such. You can go to the purport, please. I'm sorry. The demoniac are engaged in activities that will lead the world to destruction. The Lord states here that they are less intelligent. The materialists who have no concept of God, they think that they are advancing, but according to Bhagavad Gita, they are unintelligent and devoid of all sense. And this is the irony: is that some of these people are incredibly intelligent, but it's because of the fact that it's not actually properly engaged that they're ultimately still deemed as unintelligent, which is ultimately a waste of the human form. so much search for one of the first, sorry, let me go back. Notes are a little jumbled, so I apologize. Prabhupada reads just in the first sentence of the purport for today's verse, the subject matter of the speculations of Brahma in the beginning regarding the creation of the cosmic manifestation is still a subject matter for mental speculators. So the reason for this ultimately is that even though they might take other philosophers and scientists who they quote and expand on their research and such, they're taking some form of higher authority, but they're thinking that the higher authority should be somebody like them. The idea of actually pulling from scripture and then not being able to analyze and have some sort of analysis and see empirical evidence and whatnot isn't good enough for them. It feels like blind faith ultimately, even though they're putting so much faith in the works of other people who are just as limited as themselves. And it's a significant contradiction. Thinking that essentially someone has to go about the same methodology as themselves in order to rise to, in order to accept something as knowledge. It's taking the understanding that the senses aren't perfect, which we accept, but then still think that we can arrive at a perfect conclusion as a result, and ends up getting us absolutely nowhere. So this maybe they're asking some of the right questions again, but this train of thought ends up getting derailed by these imperfections. Because they're searching out the source for more than anything, more than trying to actually understand the source. They're actually trying to understand the source with the intent of actually replacing it. We see this with, was it GMOs, whatnot, or I hope this isn't like too crude, but one of the things I also thought about is if you look at some women might say that you don't need men, for example, but then they still go shopping at sperm banks. There's just certain things you can't exactly like fully replace like steps in for the natural process of things. I mean, because that essentially required the body of a man in order to actually provide. So while people might make these claims, ultimately they still find there's so much actually that is, still outside of our control. So without understanding ultimately, like, I wish I brought the book with me. I think it was in chapter 2 of Coming Back, Prabhupada has a discussion with, I don't remember his name, but I know that he was a philosopher who had served in one of the world wars. And essentially he had the understanding that we can't possibly be the body. He was on the battlefield and he had this practical realization that he would be standing next to somebody and see them get blown to bits or see somebody get shot, and he would watch essentially like the life fade from their eyes. He's like, there has to be some sort of distinction between the actual self and the body. And he wanted to try to find a way ultimately to share this to the public without having them have to go through some sort of traumatic experience ultimately. So even though his aim was good, he was still struggling to understand that there's not like this codependence between the body and the self. This is the body, being material nature, only has activity because of the active principle, which is the soul. And unless we understand that, the idea of not trying to, of the purpose of life not being to lord it over material nature, but actually be subservient to a higher being, we can't actually arrive at that. It'll always just be, we should understand the relationship between the body and the self, or the body and the soul, rather than understand that we are the soul. And it's for the sake of actually trying to enjoy more, which is just more binding in the material world. So Prabhupada is making this point. And this is the importance essentially of the ABCs, pretty much you could say, of spiritual knowledge. Understanding again, what is spirit, what is matter, control are both, we hear it all the time, So another point that Prabhupada makes is the emphasis on penance, if you will. He says, he reads, the most intelligent man is he who tries to find the cause of his personal existence and that of the whole cosmic creation, and thus tries to find the ultimate cause. If his attempt is properly executed with penances and perseverance, it is sure to be crowned with success. So this is one of those things somebody can execute so many different hardships. And it can either facilitate one's progress on self-realization or just actually perpetuate their degradation. I remember Amiyama Prabhu was giving a class. He was referenced people would go like what's it called? Like I'm trying to think. Like if you like go and dig a hole in ice. Is that the term? He said.
Spade.
Is that what it is?
Are you talking about the tool?
Yeah. Anyways, they would go to these lakes that would be like covered with water, for example, and go and like essentially, I guess, like ice pick or whatever. They would like pick out or like dig out like a circle, and they would essentially like go and like plunge themselves in. And this is a form of austerity, But and there was I remember it specifically because he made the point that there was one Russian, I guess, who would do this. And he would stay in there so much longer than everybody else, and people would be like completely and totally shocked, like how is he withstanding this, like, was it like negative 20 degrees Celsius, and all these other people can only do a couple seconds, and he's walking around, just like this. He's walking so slow, he's not running back, like everybody else. So this is austerity ultimately, but it's austerity in the mode of, it's contaminated austerity. It doesn't actually grant one. It's austerity in the mode of passion and ignorance, you could say. We see that also Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, so many demons, and so many sages actually, they go through different, they execute so many different austerities, but without it being actually done in proper knowledge, it's still subject to this contamination. We see that people, they struggle for, you could say, for ultimately for economic development, and they like this. They like the idea of grinding and of working towards something and then actually being able to enjoy the fruit of that thing, the fruit of that activity. It's ultimately in the mode of passion, and at least I can say I can speak for myself. Like I was really into this like hustle culture before coming into Krishna consciousness. I think it's kind of something that a lot of people generally get into. At least I could say, like especially being in the gym, this idea of like grinding and pumping iron. You could say it's like there's some sort of this slight, I guess you could say, like taste that's there, but it's ultimately like trying to build up and identify with something that's ultimately going to meet its end. It's completely and totally pointless, actually, at the end of the day. There's really like no ultimate point to lifting weights. I remember I was talking about this with local Prabhu. It's like it really actually, even from a material perspective, it's like you look so big and like strong, but you really actually don't even have like any functional strength. Like it really generally is just like for looks. It's like so many other different things you could actually engage in. That would be more, on a side note, I guess more practical, like use you say of the body, but it really is purely just for like gratification, like seeing how good you look. It really is a useless endeavor. But on another note, this execution of austerity essentially should be facilitated by following the previous acharyas. Satovartehe, Sangatyaga Satovartehe. This, and this is in Nectar of Instruction, is following in the footsteps of previous acharyas. So when going through, when executing essentially devotional service, it's important that we don't do such in a whimsical manner. We have to follow in the footsteps and follow such as it's been put out, because the acharyas are following their acharyas all the way back to Krishna, and he's the topmost guru, if you will. So this Lord Brahma, essentially coming back to this, he ends up finding success not by these means, again, of diving into the water, trying to speculate on what these things actually are, but it's not until he actually follows this divine inspiration to meditate on the super soul and takes to the practice of bhakti yoga that he ends up finding that Krishna reveals himself ultimately to him. This idam jnanam upashitya mamasa dharmyam agataha sarge pino pajayante So upon taking shelter of this knowledge, one can attain to Krishna's transcendental nature. And sargepi no pajayante, one also doesn't have to take birth in this material world. They also don't have to find disturbance at the time of dissolution. This is actually consistent if you pull up Canto 2, Chapter 9, verse 37. Is that this Inam Gyanam Pashatya? This Krishna says to Arjuna on the battlefield, and instructing him to take shelter of his instructions. I'm sorry, Canto 2, Chapter 9, text 37. So are you casting? Yeah. Oh, there it is. Okay, my bad. I'm sorry. Etan matam samatishta paramena samadhina bhavan kalpa vikalpashu navimuhyati karhichit. So, O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind. Excuse me. And no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial nor in the final devastation. So even though we see two different instances of Krishna's instruction, the essence, you always see that it's consistent amidst all the different conversations that we see, essentially, not just between, well, I guess there's Arjuna and Krishna on the battlefield, but then you see so many different questions and answers all throughout Bhagavatam. The knowledge itself is very consistent. And while some of the instructions may vary according to who's the recipient of this knowledge, the knowledge itself is always essentially the same. So we see that if you look at these mental speculators who are trying to figure out the origin of all things, the cause of all causes, largely so they can replace that and have more control over that which they can't control in material nature. If they would recognize essentially that Krishna is Bija Pradaf Pita, the seed-giving father, there wouldn't be, if you will, there would be this understanding that all living species essentially come from this material nature which Vishnu essentially himself impregnates. These bodies that which he impregnates, I guess, by his casting glance, so obviously significantly different from the impregnation that we see between men and women in the material world. Krishna is not just the cause of all causes and the seed-giving father, just in the literal sense, but I mean, even the seed of knowledge also comes from him. We should understand this. And it is by this knowledge, essentially, by which we can become free from this material contamination. So I wanted to come back to this second purport. By dint of one's personal endeavor, one may go near to the Lord, but without the Lord's mercy, one cannot reach the ultimate point. Such understanding of the Lord is possible only by devotional service, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Bhaktya mam apijanati yavanyas chasmi tatvataha. So, this devotional service, essentially, like I said before, is the end of all knowledge, is the conclusion. But even while executing such, still there has to be so many things that we, even inside a devotional service, that still have to be learned under proper guidance and also understood. There's so many pitfalls of spiritual life. I think the comparison is often made to spiritual life being a razor's edge, if you will, inside of that. So, sorry, forgive me, some of my notes are cut off. 1 second. Yeah, okay, sorry. I can't find it, I lost it. Anyways, there was, I'm sorry, I didn't want to hold up. One of the last cool things I wanted to essentially like bring up, I guess, was I thought it was interesting that if we look at its texts, basically it's not until Lord Brahma, the word used essentially is penance, rather than just like execution of austerities. I thought it was interesting. I know that I don't think penances, I don't want to speculate up here, but penances and austerities generally aren't taken to be the exact same in nature, if you will. I was looking up the definition and trying to prepare for the class, and penance specifically is that which is executed to rectify one's wrongdoings or sins specifically, and austerity can be likened to essentially some sort of hardship that of which one generally will like willingly take on. I mean, no, penance is typically taken on willingly. So I thought the beauty of the whole thing was that even though Lord Brahma essentially wasted so much of his time, as explained in 3820, saying that he reached the end of his time, which again is a lifespan so much longer than ours. There was still this opportunity Krishna essentially gives him to come to proper knowledge by this meditation again on Super Soul. So this is an inconceivable, I guess, mercy. If you look at so many different philosophers again who are trying to pose some sort of solutions to life's questions, as you might say. Again, we see so many people that, at least we see one, he was humble enough to at least admit that he wasted his time, but he'll likely still end up taking another body. Maybe he'll continue this endeavor in the next life, and maybe even perhaps, at some point, hopefully rise to devotional service. But a lot of these people don't get this opportunity. This is the importance of actually having proper knowledge and actually sharing this knowledge with others, because this knowledge ultimately will only, you can't arrive at it by dint of personal endeavor, as I repeatedly said, but it comes from Krishna's devotees more specifically. Devotional service can only be given by Krishna's devotees. And we obviously have practical experience of that. So many of us coming into, at least in my case, I know I came here specifically, coming into Krishna consciousness by getting books or perhaps by seeing Harinam, some form of devotional service being performed to Krishna. It's generally not something, it's always revealed to us, and then the science on how to actually practice is also given to us as well. So this isn't something to take for granted. That's what I say. Some water, perhaps. There was another, I'm sorry, I lost my notes. There was another conversation I wanted to bring up between, let's say it was Prabhupada, and it was actually the same instance. He was talking to a philosopher. He was talking about how to not just the same philosopher essentially had served in this war and had this practical realization that, okay, we can't possibly be the body. There must be some sort of self that's different from this body. He kept on questioning Prabhupada essentially, what's the process by which we can realize this, or how do you get your disciples essentially to understand this? And Prabhupada, he made the point, so he said it multiple times, it's actually quite simple. Even the child knows that they're not the body. Like, you don't sit here and say, I am finger. You understand that this is my finger, which means that I is actually separate from these different parts of the body. Let's speak of the entire body itself. And even though this explanation is made, he continues to essentially ask different ways. He's like, but how do we realize this knowledge? He's like you realize it by logical conclusion. The soul essentially, this jiva, we can't. For one, we have to understand again that we don't have a jiva, or we don't have a soul, but we are the soul. 10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. I think it's described as. So even if you were to try to sit here and put it and try to analyze that under, whatever telescope, like you're not going to be able to see it. But this philosopher is like, even though he's logically understanding, but it's like still he's like very clear. It's like not good enough. And Prabhupada's making the point essentially, it's like you're not going to be able to perceive this essentially in the manner that of which you're hoping. Like you're going to see like some shining light and someone's going to present to you like this is the jiva, for example. And you just have to understand that essentially you are different from the body, and we can understand this by looking at so many different things. Just as he had at least accepted on the battlefield. I think after he makes this point, another philosopher essentially ends up coming in. And I'm sorry, this guy was a scientist, and he was arguing that the relationship between the body and the soul is natural and necessary. And Prabhupada essentially argues back on his ignorance, stating that there's nothing naturally essentially about the jiva trying to derive pleasure, if you will, from this dead matter, from this material body. And again, I say this all essentially to drive home further the same point. I'm sorry, again, my notes got kind of put out of order, but that without having this core basic understanding, there's no like means of nothing essentially in the philosophy that goes past that. Any higher spiritual knowledge, it's not going to make any sense. It's completely and totally impossible to conceive of. I tried to explain this to last time I went home. I was talking to my mother and I made the same point. She was like, you don't eat the same food, you wear the same like clothes, you always mark your body with this stuff. Like, I don't understand, if you're trying to serve God, why do you have to do like all these different things? And like culture, like I couldn't explain. I'm like, I'm not gonna get into like explaining like Vedic culture or whatever, but it's like the idea. Like when I did try to explain like how consciousness is transferred. Anyways, I essentially told her the same thing. I'm like, if you can't understand like some of the basics that I at least try to like put forward. Maybe not even like fully accepting it, but at least looking at it from even a hypothetical point of view. There's no question for like that foundation is there. There's not really gonna be any like understanding that we can really come to in terms of the practice. So I apologize again for kind of jumbly ending, but I'm gonna go ahead and call it there. So if we have any questions, corrections, or chastisements, we can open up for that, maybe.
This idea that you don't have to dress a certain way to worship God, it's it's a modern concept, at least from a religious perspective. You'll see that in practically every religion, including back in the day in Christianity. There was a dress code when you came to the church. There is still a dress code in Islam. They encourage you. How is that? You got that Muslim? I don't know what's that called.
I definitely
They call
don't know
it
what it's called either.
in Jewish. It's called the yarmulke.
Right.
But the Muslims have something like this also.
Yeah. And they also, I know I've seen like some like in like some.
They have a long kurta.
Yeah.
And they have pajama. That generally goes with that. Huh?
It's called a pajama.
The pant. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The pant is called a pajama. So they have that, and then you see the Jews also have some kind of, at least the Orthodox Jews especially, Hasidic Jews. They also have a dress code, and then Many. Even some of these, tribes and other people, when they have their religious ceremony, Native Americans, they have their own worship ceremony, and then they get dressed up in a particular way. So this, I don't know. Of course, they can say that they were all wrong and it was not required. But hey, definitely during Jesus' time, there was this code. It was there. And so if Jesus followed it, what's your problem?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just from a historical perspective, them saying something like this just goes against even, what is this? The Amish have a dress code when you go to church. It's a certain way that they're supposed to dress. Everyone.
The concept, an interesting thing, I guess, is I grew up going to a Baptist, I guess, it kind of acted like a Methodist church, but I guess it was officially like a Baptist church.
A Baptist church is acting like a Methodist church. That's interesting.
Yeah. Anyways,
they don't know, bro. They don't know what's the difference.
the concept essentially of putting on your Sunday best, that's there. I guess so. I guess I don't know. Maybe it's because it's just such different backgrounds. It's just at least for her seeing me in Dodi Kurta, it's just and also shaved head, Chica. It's why do you have to make all these significant changes to yourself? Essentially, the idea of making
Would somebody go to their prom in a nightgown?
You're right. It's what the hell, There's gonna
what about bathroom robes?
Be a little out of the ordinary, but
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I think it seems more like these arguments are only because they talk as if the concept is wrong, but it's not the concept. It's the nature of it that's alien to them. That's all. The concept is there. It's just because they've never seen it as something different.
Yeah.
They think it's, but they mask it as if the concept is the issue. And so that's sometimes that also can get exposed. You can expose that. It's the concept is not wrong. It's just because this looks different. That's why you're saying this, but you never said this,
Previously.
You never said this previously.
Yeah, of course.
It's would you be fine if somebody came to the church with bathroom robes?
Right.
If you think that's inappropriate, then your concept is gone. Significant changes. Then we could discuss that. Then of course. But the point that you made is very valid. That without understanding that some of the basic philosophical things, they can't figure out anything else.
Yeah. It's lost. So, anybody else? Anything? Otherwise, we're ending a little early. I'm sorry for that.
Anyway, I'll say something just to run out the clock. Anyway, I guess it's sort of on topic because we're talking about traditional kind of culture, and you were mentioning this culture of exercising and especially of bodybuilding. You were mentioning how we were talking about that, and one significant point, I think, a common objection to vegetarianism is that you can't become strong, and you see. For instance, my brother and my father are both kind of into that. Of course, you can say I'm the black sheep of the family. But anyway, and one strong objection of theirs to my lifestyle is that vegetarianism can't make you strong, that you need meat in order to be strong.
Yeah, of course.
And even if you show that there are very strong people who are vegetarian, I remember a long time ago, before I was practicing Krishna consciousness, I showed my brother one vegan bodybuilder. I was vegan at that time, and he's a huge guy, massive guy. And he said, yeah, but he's not the best. He's not the best, and there's so many more people who are
There's
stronger
so
than
many
him.
who are the best. It's
but one significant point is that in an actual I I mean, even in this culture, but in traditional culture, I mean, what's the need to be so strong? For the vast majority of people, what's the need to be so strong? And even today, I mean, even less so today, because the vast majority of people aren't engaged in any kind of manual labor that requires. I mean, most people are just sitting at a desk or whatever. But there's no like requirement whatsoever to be that strong. Now, for kshatriyas, of course, yeah, that's another thing. But anyway, that's one thing. Just because you mentioned that, there's just no need. There's no need to be that strong. And you see most people, my brother, for instance, my brother's in medical school. And, but he wants to have big biceps and six pack and this and that. And you ask him, is it just for looks? He says, no, it's not just for looks. It's good to be strong and but for what? Practically speaking, what are you using it for?
It's the one time they find themselves in a life or death, I guess.
Well, I don't even think it's that. It's just you lift weights so that you can be stronger. It's for the next time you lift weights. That's the only thing they're using it for.
Good point. So, any other, I guess, questions, comments on the side? Sorry. Mataji?
So many things in modern life don't have any practical sense. The best thing is actually the education system. It's that's the worst of everything. They force you to go through that. And so when people get that kind of education, this is what they're going to end up doing, is doing all this stupid, useless stuff that doesn't have any practical significance to their lives. The other thing I wanted to mention about this, looks thing, about attire or dress. I mean, of course, it is external. It is a fact that it is external. But people have to understand that we've changed in nature, and that should become attractive to them. That our nature is different. Where devotees are saintly people, they're nice, and they don't become attracted to that. What are you supposed to do? It's very difficult if they are not attracted to these kind of things. But it requires some level of piety to get attracted to even such kind of things also. Because, there are people who like to get attracted to those who are abusers. They feel that the abusers exhibit strength and they get attracted to that. Yes, and stuff like this. Or some people get attracted to those who can hunt down a lot of animals, for instance. It's it's because they lack piety. And so, therefore, one of the aims of the Krishna consciousness movement is to create in the mass population more piety. Otherwise, they just don't become attracted to things that normal people, sane people in Vedic culture are supposed to be attracted to. And so that's through Harinam, through even book distribution definitely, and through prasadam distribution as well. So prasadam is really powerful. But what do you do when people are not attracted to prasadam? That's a really tough one.
Like the guy who took a globjamin and didn't like it. I mean, I know it's super sweet, but it's I can't imagine not liking a globjamin. I mean, maybe that's just me, but anyways.
Yeah, there are some very, very sinful souls, and it's kind of hard. But that's why the holy name is ultimately the best, because it doesn't require their acceptance. It just enters into their ear and they can't do anything about it. Therefore, Harinam is supermost.
All right. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki
Yeah.
Jai.